The views and opinions expressed in the following podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the producers, the affiliates, or digital platforms hosting this podcast. All content is for the purposes of education, conjecture, and at times entertainment. We promote inclusiveness and diversity. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Into the Deep with Jay Costa.
Welcome to Into the Deep. I'm Jay Costa. Imagine having graduated with a bachelor's, going on to become an award-winning corporate communications professional, quickly making your way up the corporate ladder and working with Fortune 500 companies, becoming an instructor at the University of Texas and Temple College, and then just leaving it all behind. That's exactly what today's guest did. She's now been a radio host for well over a decade and currently is the producer and host of Radio Medium. Today's guest is Laura Lee. She's a psychic medium helping people reconnect with loved ones to find closure and hopefully help resolve some unanswered questions. Laura's talents have been featured on TLC, NBC, PBS, Fox, Discovery Channel, Gaia, and a ton more. I want to just get right into this episode, and I cannot thank Laura enough for sharing her time, her space, and her energy with us today. So, join me as we seek light and journey into the deep with Laura Lee. Enjoy. Well, Laura Lee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes. Thank you, Jay, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, why not? I mean, gosh, if you could, for those who are listening and watching, could you share with us who you are and what it is you do?
My name is Laura Lee, and a lot of people know me as a psychic medium, and I have been on radio for a long time, I'll say. Over a decade. And I am known as a radio medium per se. So a lot of people will call me and connect with their loved ones over the phone lines. And currently I am the host and producer of my show called Radio Medium, which is heard at a station outside Chicagoland. Called WRWO 94.5 FM, and we are podcasted everywhere on all major platforms as well. And I really enjoyed that role to talk to people from all over the country that call in and would like to make those connections to their loved ones. But even more importantly, I think it's to help people find some sort of closure, find some unanswered questions that they might have, at their heart, and to help them find any other insights that might be valuable to them, given their life circumstances right here, right now. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, what I do for people.
Oh, that's awesome. What got you on this trajectory? What got you here?
Well, I'll tell you, and you might hear this a lot from some other people that you might talk to in this field. I had always had the ability since as young as I can remember, and I was very scared of it, very frightened of it. I had a challenging time as a kid. And it was not easily received for me. In fact, I was very frightened by the visitations of feeling spirit, seeing them, hearing them. And I understand now, as I've gotten older and counseled with a lot of people, worked with a lot of people over the years, children naturally do. And it is a natural occurrence for children and as well for elderly to make a connection to dearly departed. somewhere along the line, people drift from that area. I did not. And it's usually because someone comes in and tells you, that there's no such thing as ghost, or that, just authority figures coming in and telling you it's not real. So anyway, I had that as well, but my trajectory was a little different in the sense that about the age of 9, 10, I had a close friend who I really, really confided in, and she was on a bad path. And I trusted everything she said, and she was on taking some diet pills. I know this sounds silly right now, but she was taking diet pills, and she handed me the diet pills. And I thought the diet pills were a good mix for me, a good combo, because it raised my vibration, my energy, and made me a little more nutty than I already am. Okay. And that helped me disconnect from having these experiences, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it made me disconnect from here and being real with it and having that connection. And that helped me alleviate some of the challenges I was having with it personally, one-on-one. And I also did have a connection in the church. And I will say this, I was raised in the church, and half my family was Catholic and the other side was Protestant. And I remember being in school, on a Sunday morning, one of the Sunday schools, and talking to the teacher out loud about making a connection to a deceased person, just like Jesus presented himself to his disciples. So anyway, I was told that was blasphemous and I shouldn't be doing that sort of thing because that's the work of the devil, and you don't know what you're talking to because it could be evil. So that even spiraled things even more out of control. So you know how that can happen for anybody. So at any rate, my eating disorder became more and more increasingly out of control. And I would say I nurtured that for about 10 years until I had a near-death experience. I was in college, and, I was in bad shape, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And I collapsed one morning, and I was alone with all my roommates, and all the other girls were out of the dormitory. I was in my college room, dormitory room, and I was on the floor, collapsed, felt like I was going to have a heart attack. And I pretty much did. And at that moment, I had a visitation. I know this sounds so loony. I had a visitation from an angel. And that angel had revealed to me that I was perfect and I was beloved. And that everything that I am is for a reason, and I am to embrace myself. And that's the message all of us need to hear, that we are perfect the way we are, warts and all, and to embrace it. And when I was taken by her, I've got to tell you, I felt like everything just disappeared. And it just, all this darkness went away. And I felt like I was going through this dark, and towards a light. And she was just humongous, beautiful being. And I saw that this heaven and earth, it was just like a star galactic universe behind her. And I felt like we just hovered in this universal space together. Nothing else existed but her and me. And I felt this tremendous amount of love from her. love that I can't even express. It's not a human love. It's not a romantic love. The closest I can get to it, and I've expressed this before on some of my other interviews, is perhaps being a mother myself and to my own child. And so when I came out of that experience, and I did, I went to go get help because she told me she would be with me through that process to get help, and I was to get better. And I realized then there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing. There is also, Jay, no death. There really isn't. And so death maybe of the physical body, but we are all present. We're all continue on this journey. We've got this much time as a span in our lives as Jay and Laura, but our spirits are so much bigger than this. And there's so much more we have to do than just in this lifetime. But when I came back and I got myself help, my abilities came back stronger and full force. And so I went ahead in communications. I diverted my attention immediately into communications, felt totally guided. But I was doing this on the side, always. Even though I went and finished out my communications degree and went into corporate communications, snore, and I couldn't handle it anymore. It was just too much. It was too heavy for me. It wasn't the right calling for me. And this started to pick up steam, and eventually I stepped away from that and went into this. So that's a long drawn out response to your question, but that's how the turn of events came about for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then interesting, I will add to that. Interesting, when I decided to make this call official and step out, it wasn't a year after that, I got a call from K-Big radio station in LA for a show called The Angels in Waiting.
Come on.
I'm not kidding.
That's awesome.
And I know, Angels in Wedding. And it was a show where I answered callers to connect with their loved ones.
Mm.
So it was just like your personal experience you shared with me. You just see the signs, so you know you're on the right path.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Obviously, there's some really personal stuff in there too, but I think that that's the key to, discovering who we are and unlocking our fullest potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we have to go through the fire.
Yeah.
No, almost always we have to go through the fire for transformation, but it seems like constant fire sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. Seriously. I know. I feel like I should have extinguishers everywhere at certain points in my life. So I completely align with that. But I suppose, it's, in nature, we realize that that's how everything is created, right? Through friction, through just that conflict, and then there is a rebirth, or there's something profound that comes from it, at least.
There is. It took a while for that to sprout. And I think it was through tons of therapy and working with the right medical team to help me get better. And it really is about our health and being centered and grounded in who we are and just embracing all of it. And so when I fully said, okay, I'm coming out of the darkness really about this stuff, and I'm just going to go out there and do it, then magic happens, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's literally like stepping in with faith, stepping into, okay, I'm just going to follow this, and I'm going to feel the intuition that I'm going to just do the right thing.
Yes. Resonates with the heart.
Absolutely. Was there a point in that time where, you talk about, corporate communications, was there a catalyst that made you say, no, I can't do this?
Yes, there was. The catalyst was, and there goes my little guard dog again. Yes, the catalyst was I was with a big Fortune 500. I don't even know if I should say the name here. And I was in their communications department and working on a project that produced our company big revenue in tobacco. It was about 60% of their profit.
Wow. Wow.
And I was working with a lot of those corporate executives. And one of the executives' bed got caught on fire smoking. And we were working on the project, and I was the lead in the project. And when I found out the news the next morning, because I was literally sick on the project because everybody was smoking around me. And I wasn't a smoker. I was kind of adverse to it because I grew up in a family with a bunch of smokers back in the day when it was acceptable, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we were just starting to go through that transition where it was starting to become alarming. So we had a lot of attorneys involved with the wording and everything. So when that incident happened with that one executive, I said to everybody the next day, because the guy actually was in the hospital, thank God nothing happened to him and his family.
Yeah.
And I said, that's alarming. That's a sign. That's a sign this isn't right. And it was something simple like that. It might not have been alarming to them, but that was a big aha moment for me. And being sick on the project and tired. And eventually that project didn't happen because of other incidences. And I saw it as, this is it. This doesn't feel right anymore. And why am I serving my time using my communication skills for something that doesn't seem aligned with my soul and my spirit? And I'm doing this work on the side for other people that does feel right. And I'd rather be centered in a place where it feels congruent with me.
I love that. Why do you think it's so challenging for some people to be able to take that step, right? Because they can have a comfortable job and it's, job security, but then there's that tugging.
I think it comes down to job security. It really does. That is a big deal for a lot of us. It is. When it comes down to the basis of the hierarchy, really, having all of our needs met is really important. And rightly so for a lot of people out there. And it's almost like the golden handcuffs to some degree, even if it isn't golden.
Right. Right.
Showering with money or anything like that. But, to have the idea that you're taken care of on some level. But in reality, that's all are you ever really? It's a false illusion.
Right. I agree with that.
We saw that through COVID, didn't we? Okay. But then now a lot of people, all of a sudden, COVID did wake up a lot of people because now they're calling that the Great Resignation. So a lot of people did have a wake up call during that time. And in fact, that might go down in history books because I'm getting a lot of those calls from callers who are like, well, what's my next step? So now they are starting to pay attention. What's most important? Our lives, our health, But if you don't have your health, what do you got?
Right.
Nothing. So, and also, especially if you got kids, that's another big one, or a family to care for. At the time I made that decision to shift, I wasn't a mother, I was married, but we didn't have those responsibilities, as a parent at the time. So I stepped away from a lot of money. Yeah. To go out on my own, because I got to tell you, this business, you don't see millionaires in them. So, that's not, if somebody's out there thinking about this as their calling, that's not what this is about, for sure. And that's the difference between this and a job. This is a calling. This isn't something you train for. I mean, you can, I guess. There's a lot of programs out there. People can develop their abilities to fine tune their psychic gifts. And by the way, Jay, I will say this too. I believe all of us have what I have, or some sort of sense of intuitive hunch, sixth sense to guide them. It's natural. It's a part of our being. It's part of our soul. And it's something that a lot of us haven't been taught.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind me asking, and if you don't mind sharing,
sure.
What are some of those feelings or those thoughts that you get when you're receiving either a message? Is it a vision? Is it more visual? Is it more sonic?
For me, it comes in all ways. Like I was explaining, when I was a child, I was seeing images, unfortunate images sometimes. I think this happens to a lot of people, and this is why it's scary. You might see scary scenes, the death sequence, which isn't necessary to do when you're a medium. It's kind of like the kid from Sixth Sense.
Okay.
You know how he was seeing death sequences or the scary images. Those would happen frequently. And so seeing them, kind of feel them in your presence. You can smell their breath,
Wow.
whether they were alcoholic or smoked a cigarette. And so to me, those are all feelings too. And then sometimes you could hear their voice. Sometimes it's audible. Sometimes it's quite inside within me that I can sense it. That's why I can do it over the phone to people, because it's all intuitive. It's all within. It's not a visual connection to somebody to make those connections. So it's very similar to having a dream. And it seems like, when we have a daydream of a connection to a loved one, let's say that's alive, and we think of them, and then next thing we know, we get a call from them, right? That's how mediumship works. That's the best way to explain it. So, but for me, it hits in all different ways. But I also believe that each spirit is different in the sense that some are stronger visually, some are stronger audibly. Just kind of like we are as humans. There's always the person who stands, the person who's the quiet spirit soul that stands against the wall versus the one who's in your face. And that's how they come across often when I feel like I'm making those connections for my callers.
Has there ever been a time where, you were taken aback by something that you were receiving and maybe had to stop in the middle of it for any reason?
It's funny you say that. The first thing that comes to my mind is a show I did with a bunch of my colleagues for Discovery Channel. And we went down to Roswell to investigate the whole incident down there. And the network asked me to host a seance in the hangar with everybody. And so we sit down at a round table. And before we marched in there, though, I had everybody sing Kumbaya. Because actually I get a little nervous about calling in spirits in that form.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all walk in there, we sit down at the tables, we had some cameras on us, and I begin the seance. And I always go in with the idea that we're just kind of playing, because it is somewhat play. And all the cameras were rolling, and we finished our little seance introduction, and everybody's holding hands. Everybody's got their eyes closed. And all of a sudden, Jay, the noise on top of the hanger sounded like there was a bunch of people jumping on top of it, or people throwing chains at the sides of the walls of the hanger. I thought it was going to wet my pants. And everybody else was just standing there stunned. Our cameramen started to pass out, getting sick. One of the colleagues at the table was a ghost hunter. His equipment went off. So he got up and broke the chain just to see what the noise was outside the hangar, because he couldn't believe that was just brought on by the seance. He goes out, opens up the hangar doors. There's no one out there. And no one out there. The signals on the equipment are going off. The cameramen are down. We replayed the footage, and there's a white thing that was spiraling around our table while we were going into the seance and the noise was happening. But we had to stop filming because people were getting sick, probably from the experience. I was not sick. Neither were some of the colleagues that were at the table, maybe because we're used to working with higher realms than playing with these kind of spirits. That whatever we were calling in or whatever we were working on, that was several years back, but that was probably my most significant experience that really made me stop and really think, what were we doing together as a unit there? The most recent, I've got to share this story too.
Yes,
I had
please.
a caller just at the top of the year who I connected with his lost child, his baby. They lost a baby. I know, isn't that terrible? And when I was talking about the baby, we heard a coo on air. And I couldn't believe it myself. We could all hear it on the actual audio. And that was intriguing. In fact, he heard it too. He said that he and his wife had heard it often at home. And that was the reason why he was calling into the show. And it was good news, though. They had shortly just conceived a new child within a month after we talked on the phone. So if anything, I think what it does is help people release from the experience, to let go so that they can continue to walk on, because that's where I was. I was kind of like stuck, at this door and having this experience with my eating disorder until I hit a wall and crashed. And then I realized it's okay. It's okay. And I feel like some people just have to need a hand, whether it's from a counselor or a medium. Not everybody wants to go to a medium, of course. Mediums aren't for everybody, and I totally get that. But to help them go through the door so they can be open and receptive to life thereafter.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point, but I also feel too, right? If someone's maybe not comfortable going to a counselor, they might be more comfortable going to a medium.
We have that. And that's why I think there's many of us available out there, to help people move on from their experiences. Now, there are certain mediums out there that work with the spirits and help them transition. But I think it's a twofold process. I think it's the person here as well as the spirit on the higher realm, because there's got to be some sort of release. So this person here in the physical realm can actually live the rest of their life and not be the walking dead like I was.
Right. Right. And it goes back again to, like you talking about with, your near-death experience and how that it changed everything for you.
It did. It did. It was a very pivotal time for my life. Yeah.
It takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of courage to be able to not only just get through that or get through some of those things, but also then to be able to now share your story where there may be people out there experiencing the same things or something similar.
Oh, yeah. 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 And I get so many people at different stages of their lives. I coach and mentor people through this process too. If they happen to have that personal experience, all of a sudden, I was working with a gentleman who had a heart attack. Recently, all of a sudden, he came out of that heart attack experience after being proclaimed dead, having contact with spirits and never having the experience before, ever. So, it can happen spontaneously to people. Never even dreamt of it before, never even thought about it. Thought it was a bunch of bull previously until he had the experience personally. So, and then thought, what is this? What is happening? Am I going nuts? And quite honestly, I think a lot of us out there, a lot of people out there have these personal experiences but don't want to talk about them because they're afraid for how people might view them.
That's a great point. And I think that's another reason why I enjoy this kind of dialogue is because we can remove that negative stigmatization for someone who might be experiencing something. They might not be able to work up the courage to speak out about it. Right.
Yeah. Well, it makes it easier when I have somebody sitting there dialoguing with me and who's open and receptive.
Sure.
Such as you, Jay.
Oh. And so how do you feel like we can help open hearts and minds to even just the understanding and concept to the spirit realm?
That's interesting question that you asked, because I'm at a point in my life where if they believe, that's great. If they don't believe, I'm not there to try to make someone a believer. When I first started, when I was younger, I might have had that drive to make people believe, but now I'm not, and if somebody is ready and willing and open, I think that's when the teacher appears for the person, when they're ready. And everybody's at different places in regards to that. Some may never, ever be open and receptive to that. But I will say, having seen my loved ones go, and fortunately, they've lived long, beautiful lives, and being close to a couple of them that transitioned, they did start seeing their loved ones right before they transitioned, and they seemed happy about it. And my grandfather, just thinking of him right now, I remember distinctly him even claiming to see angels right before he transitioned, which my brother kept saying he was seeing him. But, he did share with us, he was seeing beautiful light beings, and he was also claiming to see certain people in his family. So, we've all had those experiences with our loved ones or with our children, or maybe it's not your own child, maybe it's a friend's child or a niece or a nephew who saw something and relays it, and it's kind of spooky to you, but just trust that what they're seeing, I wouldn't deny. That's the key. And just be inquisitive and curious and being open and receptive to maybe even asking them more questions about what they're seeing or what they're experiencing, which doesn't seem unusual for them.
That's a great point. And it's interesting because I was going to ask you, and you brought it up momentarily in there, was for children, if children are having these experiences, what's some advice that you think you could give to a parent of a child who's maybe having an experience or visitations?
Please don't shut it down for them. It doesn't mean that they're going to go out there and become a medium one day, God forbid. And I know a parent would struggle with that because that would be a tough situation for a kid to go out there and start talking out loud about seeing spirits. But I would tell them to just be open and receptive to what the message is coming through, because I think our loved ones use the channel that is most open and receptive to get through to us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's through our children. And it could be through our elderly.
That's a great perspective. It's so true. It's especially with how children are just so innocent and open to everything. Mm-hmm. They're like sponges,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We have a couple of those in our family.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, they're open. Really open. Yeah.
And has there ever been a time where you've been receiving a message or you're feeling something and you're doing maybe a reading for someone that's a caller, and you're confronted with maybe something that's a little bit more negative than you anticipated? Does that happen?
Yeah, it does happen. And I try to be diplomatic as possible. And it's not usually, a lot of people have the fear that if they're going to talk to a medium, they're going to hear about their own death. That's furthest on the most last thing that ever crosses my mind. And I'm not there to tell anybody when they're going to transition. And even if somebody asked me, I don't think I'd answer that. But yeah, there's been some uncomfortable things that have come across, and I may acknowledge it, like there's been abuse. A lot of abuse that comes through. And if they acknowledge it, that's great. If not, and they don't want it presented, we'll honor that. There's a lot of that, or homelessness. I had a family who a house burned down in a fire out in California, right? So that was really difficult. And then, of course, just anybody who loses a loved one, it's always difficult, to communicate for someone who's really, really sad still for their loss. And so my biggest recommendation to everybody out there who has been hit with it or is still grappling with the loss of a loved one that might have been recently because of the pandemic or something else that has taken the life of a loved one, is just to really be with yourself and go through the grief. Be with those feelings instead of avoiding them. I think somehow that helps you process much faster instead of burying ourselves with some sort of, I guess, addiction, right? Whatever that might be. And mine happened to be an eating disorder that got out of control. So, there's so many things we can do to preoccupy our minds to not deal and cope. But I think once we do, we can process through it faster and get on with our life to live. Because there's still some more beautiful things to be experienced.
Absolutely. Every day. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes if we're, even just feeling that grief and letting it consume us, we're missing what our loved ones who have now transitioned, what they would really truly want for us to continue doing is living life and loving it and enjoying it.
Yeah. And, I think they always come through with messages like that.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't know if sometimes the person always receives it that way. Right. Because they're so shut down. So, yeah.
How do we encourage folks to maybe open up after having had such a difficult loss of a loved one, right? And they're feeling this all-consuming pressure of that emptiness and that grief. And
well, another thing I've recommended to a lot of people instead of, in addition to trying to sit with the feelings, is hug someone. I think it was Dr. Kubler-Ross, but there's been varying opinions on who said this, that 4 hugs a day is the necessary requirement for us just to get by as humans. 12 hugs a day is for us to thrive. So if you haven't had 4 hugs today alone, that's a little scary. If you want to thrive, you better get your 4 hugs in. So as a mother, I always make sure I'm hugging several times a day. And then furry friends also count. I will put that in there. Right?
yes.
Our furry friends always help. So my little one just got quiet, and I was surprised she did. And oddly enough, she's our little COVID friend. We just got her, and her name is Angel. And I didn't even name her. That came from
oh my gosh.
That came from one of my daughter who named her. She's a sweet pea.
Pets have such a way with just being there for us and just showing us that love, that unconditional love. That
yes. Yes. There's serotonin. And the scientists even say all that really does help us bounce back. So, I mean, there's proven science data out there. Not that everybody's into the science, that having that kind of connection with either a furry friend, which gives off serotonin naturally, or hugging somebody can make such a big difference in our lives.
Absolutely.
COVID, it was so hard to do that hug, wasn't it? So now that everything's open up, we can do that.
Get back to hugging.
Back to hugging. Yeah. So maybe, we could see things starting to bounce back for all of us. Right. We already are where we are.
Yeah. What I guess, what advice, what would you suggest somebody do if they're, I guess, grappling with wanting to communicate with a loved one that's transitioned? Do you feel like if they need to be quiet and listen, what would you tell them?
There's a couple ways for anyone out there who's really open and receptive to having a personal experience. Yeah, being quiet would be one of those things. Being really quiet in silence. Silence is golden. Truly it is. If you can meditate, that's even better. But for those who cannot meditate, and I understand not everybody's capable, is before you go to sleep at night, to invite your loved one to come into your dream and welcome them to come and visit with you. And then go to sleep if you can. And and you continue that process until it happens, because you're open and receptive to the experience. But my recommendation is also to keep a journal next to your bed. And when the experience happens and you wake up, write everything down, everything that you can remember from that experience. Because to me, that's how we work as mediums. At least I do. A lot of my visitations for clients will come in the evening hours because I'm open and receptive and more relaxed in my mind, an open vessel, more so. And anytime we have those visions of our loved ones that cross the mind, those are visitations too, but we're more receptive to shrugging those off during the daytime because we're so busy with so many other things. So it'll be a flash, in an instant. It might be a song. It might be a sentimental item that we find of theirs. And speaking of my grandfather, he was a state policeman. So I had his badge, and his badge came out the other day. I found it. And so I knew he was with me, at that moment. So I don't always need to tune in on the spiritual realm. It's sometimes even those sentimental items that mean so much that show up at the right moment to make that known to us that they're there. Okay. Because they can never go away. They're always part of us. We're all one. And that's such a big concept. And it's just so overwhelming to really understand that with our minds. But they are part of us. It's part of our DNA. We're all one. We're all connected. So even we are with our loved ones or our friends on earth, just like I said, we think of them and then all of a sudden we get a call from them. It's no different from our loved ones on the other side. They're there with us in spirit.
I love that.
I would love to have anybody who has one of those experiences with their loved one, if they are sleeping at night and they put to practice what I just said, I would love to hear from you if you had a personal experience like that.
Absolutely.
And celebrate your joy with it. Because when it does happen, I know that's a little exciting for people. Because a lot of people tell me they can't remember their dreams. But I think if you ask them to help you remember and to come through the dream, that you will in time.
Absolutely. I think it was a great suggestion, even talking about having a journal, or you can keep it on the side of your bed, wake up and start writing before you forget.
Yeah, that's what happens, right? We get up and we start our day. And I think that's what blocks us from having those personal experiences more regularly. Because as I said, it's somewhere in between the child experience and the elder adult experience where we get caught up in the day-to-day. And again, somebody else could have shut us down and we just shut that experience off. Because I think a lot of people can honestly say, I remember having an experience like that. And it scared me. Or maybe it didn't scare you. I know a lot of people who told me that they weren't scared. But I didn't realize or recognize some of these people that were coming to me. So, it's not bad. 99% of the time, it's benevolent spirits. Spirit is benevolent and comes in peace.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever protect yourself in any sort of way, spiritually, or?
I do an invocation every time I work for people or with people, more for their state of mind.
Mm.
I believe we can choose at any given moment in time to go into the fear or go into the love. And the fear, if you're in fear when you go into the personal experience, it might conjure up some fearful events, scary events. But if you go into the experience with total love, I believe that in itself is 10 times more powerful than the fear. So, but the invocation does help. And it does set the tone. So it's more or less like a little affirmation that we're working in the light. So, and every time we go on this show, we usually do that just to set the tone, to make sure technology works too. Because when you're working with spirits, technology for some reason has its challenges.
Absolutely.
You're experiencing that sometimes on your end.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
It happens, and sometimes we don't even realize it until after the fact. And George will be doing some stuff in post, doing some editing, and be like, he'll send me a little snippet, like, "Did you hear this? Did you see this?" It's great, yeah. So we have like a folder of certain things that we keep.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
you need to post those.
I think we might. Yeah, I think we might eventually. So it's just kind of something we haven't. This is the first time I'm talking about it openly, that we've been doing it. But yeah, anytime something will come up, we'll save it.
Yeah, that's like I said, to have that audio of the baby coo out loud. That was just phenomenal. That we actually heard it on air.
Wow.
So over the call. Now, those are experiences I personally have sometimes over the phone, but to have other people hear it that time too, and the caller on the other end, as well as other people who listen to the podcast, it's just incredible. So it's great when other people can share in the experience.
Absolutely, because then people are come to, I think, a fuller understanding of what it encompasses. In that, oh, okay, maybe if they have a little shred of skepticism, maybe that might wear it down a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that story I shared you about the hanger. Anybody there who wasn't a believer was after that.
I bet. Yeah.
And like I said, I was even thrown from that experience. So most powerful moment.
Did you have any, did you have any influences that, like, people that maybe you looked up to, or their work that you studied or admired, or maybe anyone that influenced your path to get to where you are?
As a child, I will say this. It was common in my family that the women in particular would talk about, so-and-so came in my dream last night, or I could have sworn I saw Dad out of the corner of my eye. And so that kind of talk always happened in my family. So that kind of encouraged me and kept me open. And I didn't think of it. That was just our normal conversation in our household. And then later on down the road, I would, as a teen and going into my teenage years, when I started the eating disorder and everything, interestingly enough, I would ride to school every day with my dad. My dad would take us into school because the bus was a hard ride. I didn't like to ride the bus. So we'd ride to school and he'd always listen to talk radio. And interestingly, there was a woman on air at the time, and she was a psychic medium. And she was on Morning Talk. And she would do her connections for callers. And I felt like right before she even communicated or talked to the people, I had those connections. So she kind of influenced me on some level and I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think at the time, oh, I'm going to grow up and just be like her. There's no way in my mind did I ever think I want to grow up and be a psychic medium. No way. Never a thought. Just did not register. It wasn't until after the near-death experience that I'm going through the communication channels and in my early years. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting people who are asking me to do this because I was doing it for friends and family. It just starts to build. And I'm like, there's more to this. This is it. I feel more joy giving in this way. So then I started meeting some other people on the path who had influenced me. And then when I got out there and I'm on the radio show out in K-Big, I find out, Jay, that there was an aunt of mine in my family who was a medium who met with people in her home, but it was a secret in the family because they were in a community that everybody was involved with the church. And so, she kind of kept quiet under wraps about it. And one of my aunts at the time came to me and she says, we wondered who would be next. So, I didn't know that ran through the family line. But again, I will reiterate, I think we all have it. So just some people are stronger at it than others. And I think the more you use it and the more you connect, the stronger it becomes. If it's just like anything else in our life, if we, don't keep our brain sharp as we grow older and doing puzzles and reading and exercising it, just like our body needs to be exercised, we start to lose it. So I think this ability for us to make connections, not even to higher realms, just our sixth sense, our intuitive nature, develops if we use it. We use it.
I love that. And it makes perfect sense, and especially if it's a skill set or if it's, however someone wants to describe it, using it will definitely strengthen it over time.
Yes. Yes.
I love that you brought up about, the women in your family, because, for my family, it was the same thing. The women would talk about, and that's, my mom would always talk about, it was this relative or was this person or that, and it would always be open to talking about like these dreams and visitations. And
yes,
it was always a present,
discussion.
It was never taboo to talk about.
Yeah, it wasn't taboo in our family either. Yeah. And but I do remember my mom telling me once, before I had my near-death experience, she says, Laura, because I would talk to her on occasion about certain things that had to deal with that realm, even though I was trying to tune out from it and the experiences I was having. And she goes, whatever you do, just don't go out there talking to other people about it.
Look at you now.
They had a hard time with it at first.
I'm sure they did, Laura.
So they all did. And especially, coming from, my mom and dad worked hard, wanted us to get our education and which, they all didn't have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and I understood. But when I made the transition, I told them, I just felt this was what I'm supposed to be doing. And they said, my mom says, I just worry about you because, there's a lot of people who don't like that. And there isn't. But, I think it's with anything. It really is. My brother is an attorney. He gets slack for being an attorney,
Right.
So we all do our best.
Mm. I love that. We all do our best.
We
Absolutely.
do our best. Just do your best every day.
Mm.
So,
I love that. What are some of the services and things that you offer on your website?
One of the things I really enjoy doing is coaching people and sharing how to get in touch with it themselves if they're having these personal experiences. So I have a lot of webinars. We have one coming up about spirit guides. So how to connect with a spirit guide for life direction. That might help a lot of people right now who feel like they're a little lost from the COVID transition, sitting at home now with a little more time on their hands.
Right. They finished all their Netflix shows. Yeah.
Right. So, but anyway, I really enjoy having those visits with groups of people that are looking for that transition or looking for the information themselves. So I'm not being their communicator. I'm not being the psychic medium for them, but showing them how to tap into it and to receive those messages themselves. So that's one of the big things. Other than that, I really enjoy still being available and open to people who want to call into the show and talk and chat like we are doing here. And then we post it on the podcast. So people actually get to hear the recorded readings. So that's the two things that are high priority for me right now with helping people make those connections for them. So on the website, it's contact your guardian angel, contact your dearly departed for healing grief. Helping people find it themselves and making those contacts for themselves and life direction or how to listen to that divine guidance. And, there's a lot of things out there on the web right now. Oh, the kids are so into it. As my teen is showing me that it's very popular on TikTok right now and some of the other platforms. And there's a lot of misinformation out there too. Of course, that's what social media is good for, right? and media. But, at least people are exploring. I will say that. And there's a lot of exploration around this area right now, more than ever. And that to me says that there's a big awakening.
Do you feel like with some of these either world events and things that are happening sometimes, can that sometimes get in the way of you receiving messages? Does that ever affect you?
Yeah, I think it does for everybody. So I try to minimize it. And when I'm working with people, I spend a lot of time taking care of myself. Yeah. That's the only way, because like I said to you at the beginning of our interview, what I found is that once I started taking care of myself and I healed and I got better, it became stronger. And that time, the second round for me, I wasn't scared because I was grounded and I felt whole and I felt prepared and ready. And my experience demonstrated to me and showed me that we're okay. We're okay. And I had a choice. She kind of gave me a choice. And the choice is always ours, if we want to come and go. So my choice now, when I'm working with the public, whether it's in an audience setting or by the radio show is I spend a lot of time alone in the morning, and I do a meditation that usually is in the woods. I'm really connected to nature, and spending time alone with my family before I step into that room in my office now and connect with those people for them. You know, that's really important to make those connections stronger. And your health is most important for those kind of connections to happen. So, and to flourish.
I love that. Oh, that's wonderful. All starts with that self-care, sincerely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So where can folks find you on the internet?
They can find me at radiomediumlauralee.com. And Laura is spelled LAURALEE.com. So it's one word. And they can find that podcast on any favorite forum. And they can listen to the show Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, going to my website. And they can actually listen on the listen link right there. They'll take them right to stream anywhere if they are in the listening audience, you know, surrounding areas right now. So, yeah, that's where we are right now.
Yeah. And I can't stress that enough. It's so important, you know, taking the right steps to find some of that closure. And it's wonderful that you're able to do this for so many people and share your passion, your love, but also your abilities and your gifts. You share those with people, and that's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with me and allowing me to share bits of my story.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time and your energy and just, you know, joining me on this journey, you know, because it's just as much of a learning experience, you know, for all of us. And there you have it. I really can't thank Laura enough for sharing so many personal stories and struggles with us today. And Laura really inspired me to share something else. And it's the first time I've ever talked about this outside of very close people to me. But I too also suffered from an eating disorder for a period of time. And it's been some time now. And I've never really talked about that. But thank you, Laura. You've given me the inspiration and the strength to be able to talk about it with people. And even just saying it now, I feel a weight because I know there's going to be a lot of people hearing this. We talked about a lot in this episode. We really did. And I think the number one thing that really sticks out is that importance of self-care and how Laura shared with us how that really transformed her perception and her perspective on really just accepting her gifts. You can find Laura Lee at radiomediumlauralee.com, as well as on Instagram at radiomediumlauralee. Thank you all so much for listening. We cannot thank you enough. George and I have recently started a Patreon page, so join our inner sanctum. If you want to continue the conversation, we go a little bit further. We have longer episodes that we split up. We give you extra bonus content as well as some other exclusives there. So be sure to check out our Patreon page. If you're watching, be sure to hit that like button. We hope you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Until next time, take care of one another and keep thinking for yourself.